Hey everyone, back tuning into today's video. We're going to do a month ahead look ahead today with the Japanese model, the CFS and the Beijing Climate Centre as well. So we're going to get some of the longer range charts together and see what they're showing for the next month. It's taking us up towards the middle to latter stages of November, would you believe? So right up towards the end of the autumn. Hard to believe we could already be talking about the end of the autumn, but of course it was a very slow start to the autumn with such a warm and dry September. So it's going to be probably quite a shortish sort of autumn this year. So we'll see what the charts are showing for the next month in a few moments. Before we go on with that though, just want to thank everyone very much for all their birthday wishes. Not sure how you all know that it is my birthday, but for those of you that have posted birthday wishes on Facebook, Twitter and here on website as well, thanks very much for doing that. You're very, very kind people. Also to say about the advertising, there's links to articles sitting underneath the weather video here on my homepage. Have a browse through the widget and see what the articles are about. If there's anything that you're interested in, just click through the link and you'll be able to go up and read the article when you finish at Gav's Webinars, of course, and you'll be able to support the website by doing that. The links to these models can be found on my links page, so if you want to see anything in this video, you will be able to go off from Gav's Webinars and see all of these charts if you want for yourself. So we're going to start off with the JMA, of course. It's JMA Friday, so we're going to do the 500 millibar height anomalies, broken down into weekly periods for the coming month. The first weekly period will be taking us from the 16th to the 23rd of October, so the week that we're currently in. 500 millibar heights are extrapolating to areas of high pressure and low pressure, and the blue colours, of course, are where we've got the low pressure. The oranges are where we've got the high pressure. So for the next week, we're looking at a trough of low pressure, area of low pressure out to the west and the northwest of the country. We've got this ridge sitting to the south and the southeast of the country. The flow generally is southwesterly through the British Isles, something like that. So it's pretty mild. It's most unsettled up to the north and west. It's driest down to the south and southeast, but all areas would have some unsettled conditions at times, but the wettest weather, I think, with that would certainly be in the north and the west. Now, as we move through to the second week period, and this one takes us from the 23rd to the 30th of October, again we've got the trough of low pressure below average heights, this time centred around Iceland and through the Atlantic. We've got a ridge sitting to the south of the country. That's a very zonal, westerly sort of setup. Doesn't get much more zonal than that, really. The jet stream, quite a strong jet stream actually, is coming through the country, something like that. Again, it's driest in the south, it's wettest in the north and the west, but all areas would get some unsettled conditions at times on that sort of scenario, and it's pretty mild as well with the air sort of westerly Atlantic in origin. And then finally, moving through to the final 2-week period, and this one takes us from the 30th of October through to the 13th of November, and it's very similar really. We've still got the below average heights around Greenland and Iceland, indicated by those blue colours. We're still bringing an Atlantic flow in across the country. We've got a little bit of high pressure or above average heights down to the southeast of the country, set up there just to the southeast over the continent. Also the suggestion really that there's some areas of above average heights running through the middle part of the Atlantic, but overall I think it's a very westerly setup. That again, it's most unsettled up to the north and west. It's driest down to the south and the southeast of the country. All areas would be at risk of some unsettled conditions at times, but the driest weather certainly close to this area above average heights down to the southeast. It's pretty mild scenario as well. So certainly the JMA is not seeing anything particularly cold or wintry coming up for the next 4 weeks. Very much Atlantic-based sort of weather. Now these are the 500 millibar height anomaly charts from the CFS model from the United States. These are broken down into weekly periods. Again, this first week period takes us from the 16th to the 22nd of October. And it's very similar to what we're just looking at, really, from the JMA for the coming week. We've got the trough of low pressure below average heights up to the northwest, around Greenland and Iceland. All this orange is indicating above average heights sitting down to the south of the country. The flow, the wind flow, the air origins is generally west to southwesterly, so it's mild. Most unsettled up to the north and the northwest, driest down to the south and the southeast. Moving through to the next week period, this one takes us from the 23rd to the 29th. Bit of a difference. The low pressure becomes sort of locked in around Greenland and Iceland up here, and this area of above average heights really just set up around the country. So that's high pressure building in strongly there for the end of October. It's probably still quite mild, but with the high pressure sort of centred right over top of the country, very long nights now, of course. We would probably, with that, have to start thinking about mist and fog patches, and that, of course, limits the temperature potential by day. So, yeah, it's generally quite a mild scenario, but because the high pressure is centred right over the top of the country there, unlike, for instance, the JMA, where it's down to the south generally, I think we have got to start thinking about colder nights, maybe some mist and fog on that sort of setup. Moving through to the next week period, takes us from the 30th of October through to the 5th of November, through to bonfire night, and the idea is that still we've got high pressure ridging through the country. Notice it beginning to ridge up to the north, though. It's starting to tie in with this big area of above average height sitting right over top of the Arctic. Now, it's not a cold scenario in itself, but what you could start to find with that is you start to bring cooler air from the north and the northeast into that area of above average heights, into that high pressure. So I think overall you will probably be looking at an increasing risk of frost and fog with that as you move through into the start of November. Again, it's not, I don't want to get you running away with the idea that it's a desperately cold scenario. It isn't, but it's just with the exact position of that area of high pressure, I think it could start to get colder, particularly at night. And then finally going through to the next week period takes us from the 6th of November to the 12th, and it seems the high pressure still going on, really ridging through the country. So a very dry period coming up again after the unsettled start to October. We're in for a very dry period with this, if this is right. So we've got the high pressure ridging through the country. Again, it extends back into all these above average heights sitting over the Arctic. And again, I think you'd be having to watch out for cooler, colder air perhaps to start infiltrating in from the east and the northeast, something like that, just coming around the edge of that high pressure. So I think the CFS is seeing an increasing risk probably of frost and fog, particularly as we go through into the start of November. And of course, in November, the fog can linger on all day, making the daytime temperatures pretty cold as well. If you have a look at the city temperature forecast on the website weatherweb.net for Birmingham for the next 6 weeks, again based on the CFS one, you can see that it is going for this drop in temperature. So we're starting off really quite mild up here, but we do drop down a little bit next week. We're only going down towards average really, but certainly dropping down from the very mild conditions that we've got this weekend. And then the overall idea is that as we move through into November the 1st being just here, the temperatures are sort of going towards average and then gradually dropping down. So getting through to the second half of the month, we get quite a big drop down in the temperature. It actually goes quite cold, but really quite cold for November. Albeit the second half of November, temperatures there are struggling to get above freezing in Birmingham on quite a few days once we get through to the second half of the month. That could be indicative of that high pressure building in and the colder or colder air feeding round from the north and the northeast. 500 millibar height anomalies from the Beijing Climate Centre for the next 10 days. These are broken down into 10-day periods. Show that from the 16th to the 25th. We've got the above average heights again sitting to the south of the country, so very similar to the CFS and the JMA for the coming period. The high pressure is down there. Low pressure is in the Atlantic. The airflow is generally something like that from the west to the southwest, so it's a mild 10-day period up to the 25th of October. Get through to the next 10-day period, going from the 26th of October to the 4th of November, and we find a little bit of a change. The trough is setting up to the east of the country there, and just here with a ridge down to the southwest. That could be a little bit cooler going through to the start of November. We could well be bringing in sort of a northwesterly flow with that, so you could have to start thinking about chance of some night frost perhaps, and maybe even some wintry showers for northern and eastern parts of Scotland. Go through to the next 10-day period from the 5th to the 14th of November. Again, look at this, got this idea of high pressure ridging in through the Atlantic into the country. Notice that it does extend up towards Greenland and Iceland as well. So I think overall the idea is that as we go through that period from the 5th to the 14th of November, high pressure is taking over, possibly an increased risk of frost and fog. And then finally for the next 10-day period, going from the 15th to 24th of November, very speculative this one, but a complete change around. We get a trough of low pressure setting up over the country. The ridge is out to the northwest, to the south of Greenland. That could be quite cold, could be feeding in colder air from the north and the northwest. With that one into that trough of low pressure, that's probably quite a cold trough. Chance of wintry showers perhaps to the northeast. So the general trend, I think, from this is that we're probably going to see things settling down through the latter stages of October and on into November. Could start off quite mild, but as we get into November, we may have to start thinking about an increased risk of frost and fog by night. Finally coming back to the next 8 to 10 days, and here we have the GFS for a week's time, Friday the 24th of October, showing low pressure out to the northwest, high pressure rising to the south of the country. That's very representative, really very good representation of what we've been looking at on these longer range charts for the next week to 10 days. It's pretty mild, driest in the south, southeast, wettest in the north and the northwest. Get through to 10 days out, Monday 27th of October, and that high pressure is ridging in then from the south of the country. It's settling things down. It's pretty mild still. The air coming around that is from the west or the southwest, so it is generally quite a mild air mass. If that high pressure was to go any further north than that, though, it would start to become centred over the country. That's what the longer range models are seeing from the start of November, and that's where you'd start getting the increased risk of frost and fog by night. The ECMWF for a week's time, again, same idea. The low pressure out to the northwest, the high pressure down to the south and southeast, bringing through this westerly flow. It's wettest in the northwest, it's driest in the south and southeast. Get through to day 10, Monday the 27th. Here comes the high pressure building in from the southwest. Again, it's following the isobars back. Pretty mild air mass from the west to the southwest, so it's a mild high to start off with. But if, as the longer range models are sort of hinting at, that high pressure starts to become centred right over top of the country, because of the very long nights that we get in November, you would have to start thinking about an increased chance of frost, fog and inversions. An inversion means it's mild at the top where you've got high pressure, it's mild in the atmosphere, but down on the surface, because the heat is radiating out, it very quickly gets much, much colder. So that could be where things are going as we get through into November. We're going to have to start thinking about things settling down, but also an increased risk of frost and fog. Before that, though, I think the overall outlook is generally quite mild. Most unsettled in the north and the west, driest in the south and the southeast. That's it for now. It's a week ahead forecast tomorrow, so come back for that. And that's all for now. Thanks for watching.